And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Publishing Triangle Awards Finalists Reading 2021, night number 1 of 2 nights. Tomorrow night, we'll be having another 8 readers, I believe it is, tomorrow night. Tonight, we have 9 readers, many of whom have read at the Bureau, so we're happy to welcome you back, sort of, back to our virtual space. We have been closed and we remain closed due to obvious reasons, but we are awaiting the word from the center about when we can reopen. And we've been doing tons of online events, as you probably know, and we're going to keep doing that as long as necessary. And actually, we'll probably make events kind of hybrid in the future, because it is really lovely to have people join us from around the world who otherwise, you know, wouldn't be able to make it. And that's been the one really nice thing about Zoom events, is having people join from Beirut and Sweden and all over the place. So my name is Greg Newton. I'm the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division with my partner, Donnie Jokum, who is still alive, even though he hasn't been on many events. He has a day job which requires him to be on Zoom all the time, and he's usually leading classes and stuff. So say a prayer for Donnie. He keeps us fed, clothed, and sheltered, and all that good stuff, and health insurance. So he's going to keep doing that, and I'm going to keep doing this. Before we get started, I want to briefly share my screen with you and show you our fabulous online store, which our lovely volunteer Carlin Murphy helped us make. So if you scroll down here, you will see that there is a Publishing Triangle Finalists section. So all the finalists are here. The readers tonight, but everyone who's been nominated is here. All the books are there. And as you saw probably in the Eventbrite invitation, there's a little code so you can get 25% off. So fill up that cart and make it happen. Support the arts, support the writers, support the Bureau. All right, it is now my distinct honor to pass over the baton to Rob Burns of Publishing Triangle. Please give him a warm welcome. Put your hands visibly together and let's get going.
I had to let one more person in. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Bureau of General Services Queer Division, for hosting our 7th Publishing Triangle Awards Finalist Reading. As Greg said, my name is Rob Burns. I coordinate the finalist reading for the Publishing Triangle. I want to welcome all of you. Nice turnout so far. It's over 40 people, and they are still coming in. Tonight, you're going to hear from 9 exceptional writers, reading from some of the best and most important books published in 2020. I'm not just talking about LGBTQ+ books either, just literature. We're sure you'll enjoy this reading, and I do encourage you to join us again tomorrow when we hear from 8 more readers, as Greg mentioned. It's an understatement to describe the past year as challenging. When the pandemic erupted in the United States in March of 2020, the Publishing Triangle, was in the process of planning our reading series for our finalists in 2020, our award ceremony, both of which, of course, were abruptly canceled. We weren't unique in that. We understand that. But we're glad that through this remote format, we can return to some semblance of normalcy and to celebrate the best of literature. We also hope we can celebrate the best in LGBTQ+ literature in person in 2022. And I'm going to echo exactly what Greg said. It's like word for word what I've written down, Greg. The silver lining of all of this is that we have learned to do things remotely over the last 14 months. It's not as good as being in person, but based on the number of readers we're going to hear from in the next 2 tonight and tomorrow night, based on the number of listeners or people that are joining us, were greatly expanded. It's not just, you don't have to be in New York to be a reader this year, and we're thrilled about that. We're going to be here tonight, we're going to be hearing from not only a good, solid New York contingent, by the way, although, and it's kind of weird because all the New Yorkers signed up for Monday night and not Tuesday night or whatever. It's good. But we have people zooming in from California, Illinois, New Mexico, and we're excited to hear their voices that we might not have ordinarily had an opportunity to hear. Anyway, before we start this program, I'm going to acknowledge a couple of people. Carol Rosenfeld, who's the chair of the Publishing Triangle Steering Committee. If you're out there, Carol, you can wave. And then also Trent Duffy, who's the chair of the Awards Committee and also the Publishing Triangle treasurer. Stephen Greco, who's the executive director of the Tharo Grumley Awards Foundation. We thank them all for their hard work. And I want to also note that all this work that everyone does for the Publishing Triangle is 100% volunteer. There is no paid staff member for the Publishing Triangle. When you get a mailing via email or just old-fashioned snail mail, it's because Carol and Trent and me and David Groff and Seth Bookey, we and other people, not a lot of other people, but other people, were sitting there at night stamping and sealing. So you know, we do a lot of work, and we do it to promote LGBT lit. So we also, I also want to thank, by the way, there are dozens of writers and industry professionals who served as judges in our 7 competitive awards categories this year. And I need to acknowledge them and thank them for the considerable time they put in, their wisdom and their help in judging these categories. 3 quick housekeeping items, and then we're going to go right to the readings. First, buy books. Support your local independent bookstore, like the Bureau. The indies are the booksellers that are hand selling our titles, so be there for them. Please consider joining the Publishing Triangle. Dues are only $40 a year, and your membership helps us support LGBTQ+ literature. You can visit our website, which is publishingtriangle.org, for more information. Excuse me. And finally, we'll be announcing the winners of our 7 competitive awards on Wednesday, May 12th, starting at approximately noon Eastern Daylight Time. So please follow along on our website, social media, Twitter, Facebook, and as the winners are announced, we'll be rolling them out like we did last year. We're very excited about that. So that does it with the introduction, and now let's move right on to the readers. Our first reader this evening is Julie Marie Wade, whose book Just an Ordinary Woman Breathing was published by the Mad Creek imprint of the Ohio University Press. This book is a finalist for the Judy Grahn Award for Lesbian Nonfiction. Our panel of judges wrote that this memoir of girlhood and all its formidable pains and pleasures takes obvious delight in the textures and sounds of language, as Julie tells the story of her body as it's come into being, through her mother's exacting demands of beauty, her Catholic school's exacting demands of innocence, and her own intellect's exacting demands for knowledge. Author Brenda Miller says of Just an Ordinary Woman Breathing, for the territory we call the body, I nominate Julie Marie Wade as Poet Laureate. In prose that shimmers with lyric energy, Wade allows us to see anew our bodies as verbs, constantly changing, constant in change. Please welcome Julie Marie Wade, who is joining us from Dania Beach, Florida.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm going to read a small scene. The only thing you need to know is that this takes place at a day camp in West Seattle, where I grew up. It's a camp called Camp Long, and this is circa 1990. Spider sits beside me for a little while, scanning the landscape for campers gone wild or astray. Did you make that bracelet yourself? She asks. And all at once a door, a portal to a new kind of conversation, begins to materialize. Actually, my boyfriend made it for me, I reply. Now Spider regards me in a different light. I can hear the shift in her voice, the note of reverence. Really? You have a boyfriend? That's wonderful. It was bound to happen, I say, now that I'm almost 11. Well, what's he like? Oh, you know, like a boyfriend. This is a harder question than it sounds, since Lee is mostly just an outline to me, a blurry apparition like the Gnostic Jesus. In some essential but inexpressible way, I didn't believe Lee's body was made of the same earthly substance as mine. Do you have a boyfriend, I ask? And this is easier now because I have established myself as an experienced woman, a potential confidant. I did, she sighs, but we broke up. I probably shouldn't be wearing this necklace now, but I like it so much, I kept it anyway. Spider has granted me license to look, to peer at the piece of silver glinting against her collarbones. It is, of all things, a key. Does it open something? I whisper, the world becoming too loud a place again, threatening to drown out our conversation. No, it's just symbolic. Her eyes are green and dreamy, but now they are moist too, like she might cry. You know, I think he was saying he had the key to my heart. Then why did he give it to you? Shouldn't he have kept it? Spider looks at me, her eyes growing wide with surprise. I guess I never thought of it that way. Do you want to know a secret, I say? It is more of a lie than a secret, but sometimes the lines between these are blurry too, the truth itself an apparition. Spider nods. My real name isn't Julie. It isn't? No, my real name is Juliet, like the girl Romeo loved. It's old-fashioned, so I don't use it. I've actually never told anyone before. Where Spider touches my arm, the little white hairs rise up, ecstatic. I promise, she whispers, but I won't tell anyone. Spider looks over her shoulder, then out at the field, then back again, her dreamy green eyes coming to rest on mine. All right, she concedes. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed something important. Thank you, I say. May I ask your real name? Spider looks over her shoulder, then out at the field, then back again, her dreamy green eyes coming to rest on mine. All right, she concedes, but you can't tell anyone, or it'll take all the fun out of the camp names. I smile into her face like a flower drenched in sunlight. I promise, I say. It's Andrea. I've never heard that name before, I murmur, forgetting to let the air pass through to my lungs. Spelled like Andrea, she says, but pronounced differently, Andrea. This is the most extraordinary name I will ever learn, better than any princess or protagonist. Mum's the word, she tells me, a long finger with a tapered nail pressed gently across her lips. Spider raises herself to standing and pulls a whistle out of her pocket. All right, everybody, gather around, she says. Andrea is the only word I write in my notebook that day. A-N-D-R-E-A. It becomes my first mantra, the key to an unseen door. In school, you learn there is a text and a subtext. The teacher says there is always a subject and a theme. The theme runs under the subject, like a dark river. You picture it like the Red Sea. Your job as the reader is to part the subject with your staff, to split the waters between what is obvious and what is only implied. In your first essay of 5th grade, you will explain what you learned at Camp Long. For instance, water lilies are not free-floating, as you once believed, but tethered to the base of the pond. This is a subject. The themes beneath it, the themes that only the best and most intrepid readers will recognize, are as follows. Beauty is never unconditional. Nothing is as it appears. The surface and the subterranean often contradict each other. Desire has deep roots that are not easily severed. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That was great. Thanks. By the way, Julie went first because she was the first one to respond. And also it just worked out that way. When we were asking finalists to be readers, she was like, boom, there. Took like about 15 minutes after the email went out. So appreciate that. In 13th Balloon, his fourth collection of poetry, Mark Bivens turns his candid eye to the American AIDS crisis. With quiet consideration and dark wit, Mark addresses the majority of his poems to Mark Crast, his friend and lover who died from AIDS at the early age of 25. This book was published by Copper Canyon Press and is a finalist for the Thom Gunn Award for Gay Poetry. In the New York Times, Maya Phillips wrote that 13th Balloon, that 13th Balloon keenly waves together fragments of memory and metaphor with Bivens' signature wit, touched with a bold sense of loss. And Published Weekly wrote of the book, achingly beautiful. The scope of this darkly humorous and always tender book paints a portrait of grief. Grief as a fellow traveler that morphs but loses none of its power over time, a power readers will be lucky to experience. Joining us now from Manhattan, please welcome Mark Bibbins.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rob. It's an honor to be here in my living room with you. I refer to this book as an elegy in pieces, and they're all untitled, and I'm going to read 4 short pieces for you now. You and I never called each other by the name we shared. It would have been like eating an echo, each of us checking opposite sides of a two-way mirror for fog left by his own breath. Months after you died, I saw someone in a nightclub in a different city than the ones in which our story crossed itself out. Someone who knew us both, but as it turned out, not very well. He looked shocked to see me, a look I didn't need him to explain, but holy shit, he said, I thought you were dead. We celebrated my not death with shots of something too sweet, and an hour later, I was vomiting into a mop bucket in a corner of the club. The coelacanth was believed to be extinct for millions of years until the sea coughed one up off the coast of South Africa after a great storm. Its name comes from the Greek, koilos, meaning hollow. One of the only facts I can find online about you is wrong. You didn't die on a Saturday night, you died on a Tuesday. It was a Tuesday morning. The sun was frozen and Mars or Venus barely glowed somewhere, or Mars was hidden in Tuesday, or Venus had broken into a billion splinters of ice and covered the grass outside the hospital, and the sun dragged with it your death from the frozen pit out of which daily it rises. Unless I too am wrong, and Thursday was the day the nurse called and told us, it's time, you should come now, he's getting ready to go. Ready to go, after how many times we thought you were going, or were ready, or to go, or had gone. After how many times I'd arrive at the hospital thinking it would be the last, only to find you sitting up, doped up, cockeyed, grinning. You'd lift your head a little and say, hey, what'd you bring me, boo? And I'd climb into the bed with you and say, nothing good, just me. Imagine a bird who lays her egg, then picks it up and flies without landing until it hatches. Imagine 1,000 of these birds chopping away at the soggy light. Since you died, 1,000 birds have daily flown through me, each leaving behind an egg, some of which rotted, some of which hatched, releasing more birds that pecked at my skull, but not generating the noise and pain one might expect. It's more like hearing someone typing an endless suicide note in a room at the end of a carpeted hall. Always one egg remains in me intact, and each time I yank it out, each time I crack it and crush it and throw away the shell, it reappears whole. I pull it out and pull it out. I break it 1,000 times, but nothing is ever inside. I carry it and carry it. I do not land. The opposite of irony is not sincerity, it's hopelessness. Speaking of which, I was struck by how handsome one of the commuters stepping over us was as I lay with ACT UP on the floor of Grand Central Station at 5:07 p.m. on January 23rd, 1991, and how effectively that handsomeness seemed to amplify the anger in his eyes. Everything about him said he would be perfectly happy to kick any of us in the head for interrupting his timely egress to Westchester. But he was well enough versed in the ways of rage to know what would have happened if he'd done it. Only now do I recognize the humor in ACT UP dropping over the arrivals board a banner that read, "One AIDS death every 8 minutes," and that I was lucky to have the luxury of deciding not to get myself arrested that day. Today is March 30th, the 30th anniversary of ACT UP, and tomorrow Gilbert Baker, the man who created the rainbow flag, will die. Strange not to know whether one's life has an asterisk hanging next to it, or is itself the asterisk. Strange to look vainly for oneself in history, and stranger to realize that there is a chance one might find oneself there. Thanks.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Mark. Powerful. Our next reader, Julia Serrano's, excuse me, Julia Serrano's 99 Erics, a cat cataclysm faux novel, was published by Switch Hitter Press and is a finalist for the Publishing Triangle's Edmund White Award for Debut Fiction. We're excited that Julia is joining us this evening from Oakland, California. 99 Erics is told from the perspective of fictional bisexual writer Cataclysm, as she recounts her experiences dating 99 different people named Eric. Really, in my life, 2 has been enough, but you know, okay. Anyway, this features humorous anecdotes from Kat's dates with the Erics and satirical takes on relationships, sexual conventions, language, the writing process, book publishing, online media, and tech culture. Our panel of judges said of 99 Erics, Julia Serrano attacks gender norms, sexual stereotypes, gentrification, and homophobia. In addition, she breaks the fourth wall and gets super meta in this romp. Whip smart, fast-paced, and drop-dead hilarious, Serrano gives us a lighthearted, fun read we all need right now. And I love this part. She's a true Renaissance woman. From Julia's website, let me just read a little of her background. She is an acclaimed author, writer, artist, performer, lecturer, speaker, biologist, scientist, theorist, musician, slam poet, activist, and feminist. And we're so excited she could join us this evening. Julia.
Hi, thank you for having me. Very honored to be a part of this reading with all these amazing people. I'm going to read an excerpt from 99 Erics. This is Kat, the main character, narrator, is going on one of her rants that she sometimes does. And this one has a little bit of Bay Area geography in here that you don't need to know. You will get it without knowing where these places are. These days, it's really difficult to talk about being queer because there's this popular assumption that society is now totally A-OK with same-sex relationships, which ignores the fact that this is far from the truth. Plus, most of us grew up in a time when this most definitely was not okay to be queer. And many people seem to have drunk the "we're just like you except for our sexual orientation" Kool-Aid, so they don't even consider the possibility that the experience of being queer might be considerably different from what straight people experience. So, Kat, what is it like being queer? Some of you may now be asking. Well, I would say that it's kind of like bicycling to Alameda, but not just any old bike trip to Alameda. You are going to the west side of Alameda for some inexplicable reason. And people will argue over whether you felt the need to go to West Alameda because it's in your genes, or poor parent dynamics, or because fetal hormones hardwired your brain that way. But you couldn't care less about these debates. All you know is that you really need to get to West Alameda. And it doesn't matter why. Plus, to you, there's a clear double standard here, because nobody would ever question you if you told them that you were bicycling to downtown Alameda instead. Now, if you were going to downtown Alameda, as everybody expects of you, you could just simply bike over the Park Street or Fruitvale bridges, both totally safe, and you'd arrive at your destination. Easy squeezy. But for West Alameda, the most direct route for you is the Posey Tube, which was built back in 1927, long before urban planners worried their pretty little heads about bike lanes. All they left you is a one-person wide pathway perched on one side of the tunnel, just above the racing cars below, with only a guardrail separating you from your impending death. The signs say that you should walk your bike, but if you did that, you'd be in the tube all day. So instead, you precariously pedal your way across the Oakland estuary, albeit way underneath all the water. And it's outrageously loud in the tube due to the cavernous echoing of all the car and bus engines. And your eyes are peeled on the tight path that you are navigating, as one small slip up could potentially cast you over the guardrail. So your senses are overloaded, and you are on the verge of freaking out or screaming or crying or dying or possibly some combination thereof. But you keep on going, not because you are brave or courageous, which I suppose are pretty much the same thing, but because there's no other way to get to West Alameda, and that's where you need to go. But then, lo and behold, you see someone approaching you from the other direction. You have to get off your bike, and they need to do the same because the path is so narrow. And you'd think that this would be a huge inconvenience, having lost up all your momentum that you had built up. But strangely, it's not. And as you squeeze past one another, the two of you make eye contact and smile. Not the fake sorts of smiles that accompany the exchange of everyday pleasantries, but rather the genuine knowing smiles of people who share the same intense and potentially traumatic experience. And in that brief moment, the two of you make a profound human connection, unlike anything you've ever felt before. Because only a moment ago, you were both completely alone in a dark tunnel, freaking out and afraid of dying. But now, you both realize that you're not alone anymore. And it's beautiful. But it's also a little sad that you had to experience all that fear and loneliness in the first place. So that's what queer is being like in my estimation. So that's it. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. As I look at our panelists, and everyone's got their own place to put themselves, but especially in watching Julia, I'm looking at the books back there, trying to see if I recognize what spines I recognize. And then I look,
completely
and there's
fake.
the corner of the corner of.
It's down.
I'm sorry. What?
Oh, sorry. It's downloaded from the internet. These are not my books. I am in my closet.
Oh.
I'm literally in the closet right now. This is just a random background, and the books kind of make the part where your hair fizzes in and out not be as bad as like other backgrounds.
I've never good for you. I've never gotten a background to work, but I look at our guest Casey Tromer's books, and then I'm looking at Jen Chaplin's and Bishak Soames, and then Sam Corfman's, but that's a nice segue to bring me to our next reader, who is S. Brook Corfman, whose book of poetry, My Daily Actions, or The Meteorites, which is published by Fordham University Press, is a finalist for the Publishing Triangle Award for Trans and gender variant literature. Our panel of judges for this category wrote, this collection of sensual, ecological, untitled poems by S. Brook Corfman investigates disaster, wonder, and change. Let it be softer than I imagine, they write. In the foreword, Kathy Park Hong calls My Daily Actions, or The Meteorites, an exquisitely crafted account of a vanishing world. Dreams, premonitions, and details of everyday life appear here as prose poems, which Corfman has described as the vehicle by which a recording practice, journaling, meets the associative power of the poem. Pittsburgh City Paper writes, "The structure of Corfman's poems shines here, as many of his selections in My Daily Actions come in neat, tidy block of text, as if trying to literally box in and contain the disorder and confusion with which the author is grappling." S. Brook Corfman joins us this evening from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Please welcome them. Sam.
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I have my bookshelf got like re-curated to, I used to have like a bunch more books here, and I like took a bunch of them off so that there'd be a cleaner Zoom aesthetic. I was gonna say something else, but I forgot. Oh, I love when people say what my poems do back to me. So that Pittsburgh review, which was like, this is what the poems are doing. I was like, great, perfect. That's, like partially, I'm always like, that's sort of what I was thinking, but I love that. That's like a more full expression of how I was thinking about them. I'm going to read one poem, which is kind of the longest bit from the book. It's the last piece in the book. And it's the poem where that kind of tidy box breaks a little bit, and we get to see kind of the line break just a little, comes in and creates more space between that language. The poem's called Premonition. I put on a coat made of paper where fear lines each side. To restore old books, the paper can be split in half and reattached with a new archival center to preserve it. I don't know what can be done with circuits and wires, but imagine edges meeting just beyond my finger. I painted my nails. That's why I chose this nexus. This doesn't mean anything as a theory of gender. I'm training my left hand to be as adept as my right. I cannot decide if I am larger than my skin. The most expensive thing I ever touched was a book, and somehow I was not afraid I would ruin it. As soon as I say, no one has mentioned this color, a woman comments on it. It makes me miss my friend, the geologist, whose favorite color is teal. Is it clear to you that as soon is actually indicative of a 24-hour period, give or take a few hours? That the woman holds a staff shaped like a key, and neither of us knows what kind of lock such a key opens? The poet is in my ear. Take notes, notes, yes, notes. That's C.A. Conrad. As soon as I got back from the sequoias, I put the smoky quartz in a box and the polish back on my fingers. Metallic sheen. I prayed at each ancient, each ossified for a little more magic than I had in my life. When I held out my hand to the phone, it did not fly across the room to me. The truth, I was disappointed. I am softening myself, and I cannot seem to distinguish this from becoming more like a child. What if hysteria is a heuristic we can use to predict the future? Not Freud. Picture Cassandra screaming unheeded, or better yet, a pop star, quote, in hysterics after bombing, as the internet tells me when I Google famous hysterics. As if these women had been recorded as individuals. These many-gendered women I feel so tender toward. When such a feeling as a bomb or a bullet crossing a gap, but what is the gap? I am afraid to go to the store alone. Each place I told a lie in, I can see clearly, as I can see my father in the chair in the middle of the room, saying, no, I don't think it's a good idea, even though that chair was against the wall and I was on the stairs. My father must have said more than that. Yes, we were talking about nail polish and what was coming toward me. The man I was sure was going to launch himself across the food court. The strange space where the fear might be justified, but until it happens, it seems there's nothing to be done. What color does the sky change when a bad thing is on the horizon, but it's not a storm or a tornado? That's the color of the interval between me and the man's possible violence. I regret not submerging myself in the very cold water called Mirror Lake. I have always wanted to go through a mirror. I add this to my list. The list is longer than I remember it. There is one day that is cool, and this reprieve makes every hot day after it seem impossible to stand. And then I saw a meteor, and then two real ones in the sky. A meteor is only the action, the burning up. And the thing about them is, unless you're lucky, you can only see them out of the corner of your eye. So you, like the meteor, are moving to a point of absence, just the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That was great. And I'm so glad you could join us. I feel like I gotta be here with, I'm here with Greg Newton. We gotta look at hybrid models for the future. So you don't have to be coming in New York or coming to New York to be part of these readings. Much as I miss having you, because I actually, but at this point, I have most books of most readers for the 2 nights, and I will be picking up the rest as time goes on. But what I used to always like is getting them signed by you, because you're, forced to be with me live and in person at the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. But we'll figure that out. We'll figure that out. Next up, we're going to have a slight change of pace, an audio visual presentation. Bishak Soam's graphic novel, Apsara Engine, published by Feminine Press, is a finalist for the Farrow Grumley Award for LGBTQ literature, and we welcome her to this reading. The Farrow Grumley judges said of Apsara Engine, with richly detailed and visually stunning graphics, this collection of 8 short stories takes ordinary tales of everyday people and transforms them into surreal, sepia-toned alien landscapes with dazzling colors splashed just when needed. Transgressive and forward-thinking, Apsara Engine illustrates and details the lives and fantasies of queer and trans South Asians, speaking their truths, dreaming their mythologies, and trying to come to grips with themselves and others. And in the Starred Review, Publishers Weekly wrote, provocative. Soam is a master of pacing, letting the emotion of her scenes churn and roil in the reader. Her debut heralds the rise of a new talent to watch. It's a pleasure to introduce the author of Apsara Engine, Bishak Soam, who's joining us from Brooklyn. Welcome, Bishak.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you. And thank you, Greg, for having me here. I'm going to share my screen. And sorry, I'm just going to get to the beginning of this presentation. Can you all see that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to read however much I can of a story from Apsara Engine. And the story is called Love Song. There are times when I could kill you. Yes, there must be. I am as bad as this. I leave dishes unwashed and pants in the hamper. For days, weeks, I scamper about in thrice-worn socks and briefs. The listing clothes rack is about to give way. Bottles and cans, newspapers, food scraps. I am a great sluggard lying prone on the sofa. My only excuse is that the spiral makes me so. But remember, I have been loyal for 27 years, with only the occasional hiccup. And don't think I've forgotten your dalliances, the tall physicist with horsey muscles, the damaged poet with lank hair. Yes, some days you have it in for me, and some days I offer a reminder that I am in great need of you, and that I am scared. At the end of a heavy August weekend, outside are car alarms, the drunks at Johnny Mac's. They're still there, by the way. Inside, here you are giving yourself a pedicure, 1 foot propped on a chair. Oh, I can't even read that. I'm hennaing my hair, steaming 2 fat artichokes, snacking on pears. I make my famous roasted red vegetable soup, beet-stained hands and all, pretending to be involved in a murder. We sit at the dining table for a change. I confess to you that I am scared. that my mother's undoing will be my own, that you have inherited your father's legacy, that plaques and tangles will start to grow, that tomorrow a plague will come to devour us both. Before we're lost in a thicket of snarls, before our synapses clump up, we pretend we're back in Ia, getting drunk on our terrace, feeding cold cuts to the feral cats. You're lounging by the pool in Kolkata, drinking a kingfisher, flirting with the waitstaff. We're running from the sweet puppies, nipping at our heels outside the Kali temple. We're in a hotel in Brussels, running a bath. Rambling through the Tiergarten, talking with the Crakes and Coots. We're in a mall in Mumbai, trying on salwar suits. That evening at Sandy Bell's, when Paddy Riley affectionately pantomimed an aggressive Glaswegian, screaming, "Aye, they'll cut you open like a fish," his hand a little too close to my abdomen. That night on Prinsengracht, when we should have gone along with the bartender who was waving us in to join the locals singing Billie Holiday songs. That summer we drove to Provincetown in your red tercel, you in a red tank top, your hair in a bun. Me in my Daisy Dukes with cocoa bean lipstick on. We're doing 60 on Interstate 95, singing along to the Kick Inside. We drive through Cranston, Providence, Swansea. We snack on wasabi peas and roasted green tea. With wind-whipped hair and sunglasses on, I'll sing you a love song. Honey child, when our day is done, after the 10,000th goodnight kiss, the last restless Sunday, when will you notice the end? Will it be over cups of tea? I will tell you the same story again when I told you last night and the week before. I'll wander off to the laundry room. It will take me 4 hours to do a load. I'll fumble with my sari. Shoelaces will undo me. I'll want to tell you something. It will be something about love. But all that will come out instead is a cackling at myself. A ha 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 ha. The inside of my skull, a tangle. You upside down, drying your hair, caught in crevices, buried alive. My lamb soon will be a bloody mess, and the slow and oily engines of spittle and shit, and no perfume on God's green earth will hide the stink of us. Will it come to this? No, it will not. I will snuff you out if you will retire me. We too will have been here long enough. That's not the end of that piece, but I'm just going to stop it for now. Maybe it's a little too much.
Thank you, Bishak. It was that was fun, actually. I love that the fact that we a few years ago a graphic novel was a finalist for. Now I can't remember which award, but and there are 2 finalists this year. One will be presented tomorrow night. So you know, I'm glad that as the community diversifies, I'm glad we're also diversifying how we look at literature. And some days, some things I wrote will actually be considered literature, maybe. So we'll see. Anyway, okay. In the earliest and most uncertain days of the AIDS crisis, a Chicago physician, Dr. Ross A. Slotin, stood up and provided medical and personal care for hundreds of people with AIDS, as well as their families and friends, as they faced the grimmest medical crisis in their lives. Dr. Slotin has recounted his experiences in Plague Years, a doctor's journey through the AIDS crisis, which was published by the University of Chicago Press and is a finalist for this year's Randy Schultz Award for Gay Nonfiction. Our judges wrote, in beautiful prose, he recalls his fears as a doctor and as a gay man living amidst a devastating epidemic. Plague Years is a precise memoir that details messy battles on the local and international scales, countering homophobia and apathy with action and compassion, Slotin balances tragedy with human warmth while making a valuable contribution to gay history. And the New York Review of Books wrote, he is unflinching in examining his own psychology, the mechanisms he erected to protect himself, articulating his sense of deficiency in a bracing confessional tone. Gotta appreciate honesty. Here with us from Chicago, Illinois, please welcome Dr. Ross Slotin.
Thank you so much for the very kind words. I'm going to read a section from the book that takes place in 1992, and it was an ethical quandary for me, and I really wasn't sure how to deal with this particular situation. So, after Manny's AIDS diagnosis, his wife tested positive for HIV. For weeks, she sobbed uncontrollably, and nothing I said consoled her. Her situation is too painful for me to contemplate. A mother, the wife of a dying husband, and herself possibly dying. I wonder what will become of their children. This is a scenario from a country torn by war, not something commonly experienced in the United States except in the era of slavery. A few years earlier, I'd taken care of a man named Orlando, a janitor in the Catholic Church who died of AIDS in 1986, leaving behind a wife and two sons aged 10 and 12. 6 months later, his wife, who was HIV negative, died unexpectedly of a brain aneurysm. The only relatives lived in Colombia and Mexico. A deacon of the church, a close friend of Orlando, took custody of the boys. Amazingly, Orlando had the foresight to obtain life insurance shortly before his AIDS diagnosis. Yet the adjudicator from the insurance company chose to deny the disbursement of money to the children on the grounds that Orlando had lied not about his HIV status, but about smoking, which had nothing to do with his death. At his own expense, the deacon hired the best attorney he could find and got the decision overruled by a judge. A gay man himself with no experience as a parent, the deacon became the de facto father and is successfully raising the boys into adulthood. I can only hope that an equally loving benefactor will be found for Manny's soon-to-be orphan children. Manny's curled up toward the wall of the room. I call to him and he rolls over, pulling himself into position as he elevates the head of the bed. His face has lost its boyish underlying fat, and the slack skin is wrinkled with worry. Accepting the certainty of his death and no longer angry or full of unrealistic expectations, he's withdrawn from the world. With furrowed brow, he looks out at some invisible landmark beyond fear. Manny, we can't send you home, I say. It seems that the hospice people won't help at home unless you tell your kids your diagnosis. They're at risk because they might come in contact with your body fluids. They'll have to know why they need to be careful. I can't, he says. I know, so you have to stay here. Your wife can't care for you alone. I won't send you home on morphine without support from nurses. Fine, I stay here then, he says in his Greek accent. You'll have to leave the AIDS unit and go to the skilled unit, a kind of nursing home in the hospital, I say. They're not as attended down there because the nurses have more patients to tend to than on the AIDS unit. That's okay, he says. Private room? Good. He brings the phone to his lap. I call my wife. She wants to speak to you, I don't know what. He presses down hard on each button like a neophyte using a typewriter for the first time. There's frustration in his fingertips. He says something in Greek. Here, he says, thrusting the phone at me. I talk to his wife. Her sobs during the last few months have devolved into whimpers, and she speaks in a cracking voice like someone who's cried herself into exhaustion. Despair has sharpened her sense of the world. He don't talk to me, he says. Her English is awkward English as her husband's. Guilt? As I tell her that he's withdrawing from the world, Manny listens, watching from the corner of his eye. He's there listening, isn't he? She asks. We talk later about this, okay? Manny stares at his feet. His hair is disheveled, and he reminds me of the heavy-lidded Woman Before the Aquarium by Henri Matisse, a painting at the Art Institute of Chicago. Her chin resting on a forearm, the melancholic woman appears to be gazing at a goldfish bowl, but clearly looks through it, or, self-absorbed, doesn't see the bowl at all. Doc, I get nightmares, he says. I think medicine's too strong. We turn it down, okay? Yes, I say, I'll tell the nurse. I get up to leave. Thanks for coming, he says. During our early encounters, I despised him for his carelessness with his wife. Now I feel more sympathetic toward him. Despite his irresponsible behavior, I admire his courage and wonder if I will be as graceful when my death looms. No doubt he infected his wife long before I warned him to protect her, or so I rationalized to let myself off the hook. He didn't purposefully infect her. I'm not even sure he considered himself to be a person at risk. So powerful was the denial. The 1980s, anti-gay prejudice in the Greek immigrant community and in the United States compelled him to live a double life. In that regard, he wasn't much different from many gay men of my generation. There are a good number of Mannies in the world with equally unlucky wives, as proven by the epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa, where AIDS is a heterosexual disease. His life is tragic, not criminal, at least not in my opinion. At worst, he is guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And even if he's guilty of more, he'd already been given the worst possible sentence without the benefit of a judge and jury. I reach out to hug him. Who am I to judge, I ask? As healers, doctors must suspend judgment and not make choices in determining who shall or should not be treated. Grateful for my sympathy, Manny embraces me as if rebuffed and then accepted. Doc, you're a real friend, he says, half smiling. Thank you.
Dr. Slotin, that I'm just having flashbacks to the 80s. So, but this is important, so thank you. Our next reader is Sarah M. Sala, whose book of poetry, Devil's Lake, was published by Tolsun Books and is a finalist for the Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry. Sarah's joining us tonight from Brooklyn. I keep telling everyone by saying where everyone's from. Just so you know, I'm in Jersey City right now. Okay, just so you know, make sure New Jersey's represented. In a Sundress Reads review, Emily Hagerman writes, Sarah M. Sala's Devil's Lake is at once cosmically expansive as well as honest and intimate in its exploration of violence on our planet, in our country, and in our day-to-day relationships. Her poems delve into domestic and natural realms, into private and public lives, and highlight many landscapes as places where people deemed other are often in danger. Devil's Lake holds love poems for the speaker's partner and the natural world around them, as well as elegies for marginalized people senselessly killed in that same world. Sala's work makes space through poetic form in the various speakers' imaginations for queer joy, while also providing evidence of America's many paths of destruction. And Publishers Weekly writes, in these pages, Sala provides a space to imagine a future world that might amend its ills and break with tradition. Please welcome Sarah M. Sala.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone in attendance. Thank you, Publishing Triangle, for all of your labor in bringing these awards to fruition. It's a real honor and joy to be here from my kitchen. I like that we're shouting out which rooms we're in. We're at that point in we're like post-pandemic, like over it almost. Okay, so I'll be reading a series of poems from Devil's Lake. I got to shout out the cover from Mishna just because it's behind me, which is super cool. Thank you, Tolsun, for letting us play with art on the cover. This first poem is called Hydrogen. You want to talk bang? Hydrogen was there at 100 hours in the coke-colored velodrome of dark matter. Gases checking gases ad infinitum. Chartreuse flare, then a deafening birth. Ions of cosmos cartwheeling pink, red, yellow, green, purple, blue, black in the sphere of night. First, I was a star, then a stain of water, then a kindergartner. This next poem is called Nature versus Nature. Before I was born, my original face was queer too. Radiated light, weather, organisms, landforms, celestial bodies, unbound by nature. Everything untouched by humans. This poem I have to turn sideways. Thinking about the book as an object gets me really excited. This is called American Ammunition. With our revolutionary safe action trigger system, the G17 9x19 pistol is safe, easy, and quick. Just what you need in high pressure situations. Glock.com. 1. A public cafeteria. The ghost of my heart gorges herself on spent ammunition. The Orlando medical examiner processed each of the 49 pulse victims apart from the gunman. Even amid gravitational collapse, surviving atoms couldn't reanimate with him. 2. I forget my hands in the grocery store, 10 ring digits in a bed of Brussels sprouts. My voice becomes a skateboard ramp. Weather balloons eclipse my eyes. Sudden questions plague me. What is a border crossing? What longitude and latitude in the cosmos do our loved ones recycle toward? 3. Empty classrooms become scenarios. I'm a cartographer of stairwells, an apostle of pony walls. A ghost appears seeking household items, pauses before the nightstand, opens the drawer to rifle past hand creams, nail files, paperback books. Over here, I say, are you my afterlife? 4. In a dream, I ward off the shooter with blossoms, cobalt, fuchsia, burnt orange, mustard, turquoise, lime, mallard, gargoyle, snow, oyster, bourbon. A carpet of fragrance to barricade the steel doors. And because I can't leave you on that note, we'll do something more fun. There's a few erasures in the middle of the book. When I announced that I was getting married, sent out invites, I got some fan mail back. So I decided to do some blackout poems here. There's 3 different versions on the same text. On receiving a homophobic letter, a series of erasures. Version 1. My dear, I wish I spent more time living, but I've never understood how. Recently, I grabbed a pen. I worked on the answer to my life. I felt a jet, a magnet, a pancake, a chair, a doormat in every cell, every molecule in my body. I'm not sure how. All I can say is I'm super not special. I used to talk to almost everyone and feel great love. I plead to you, go against the fullness you are meant to have. Version 2. Sarah, you are unbelievable. You know everyone. You came to mind because I didn't know what to do. At the age of 18, I decided to go down south. I spent 3 years in my kitchen. Unexplainingly, I lay there with no body. When I stood and said, I really don't know you, but you better get your seatbelt on. And I am now filled with his children. I'm so used to miracles, I can't even talk about them. Third and final version from the same text. Sarah, you are my heart. I wish I spent more time to get to know you. At 20, the angels I thought were helping me had to go. Everything was going south in my marriage. I was in a jet blast with no feeling. I'm not sure how long it was. You're turning a new page. I feel great love for you. You are my heart. You. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah Sala. Always so great. By the way, I want to remind before I forget, I have it written down, but you never know what's going to happen. But do remember to come back again tomorrow night. I saw actually Tommy Blount was on here earlier. I think he might have had to bounce off, but he'll be one of the readers. We have a total of 8 other finalists that'll be reading tomorrow again at 7 p.m. So if you've registered, they did get Greg, right? They did get the link for tomorrow. Okay, so come back. Next up is going to be Jen Chaplin. My autobiography of Carson McCullers by Jen Chaplin was published by Tin House and is a finalist for the Judy Grahn Award for lesbian nonfiction. As an aside, I need to add that I love her sense of humor. When I get ready for these things, I email all the readers and I ask for the pronouns because, you know, I'm an old white guy and, you know, I want to make sure I don't trample over everything. But I also try to make sure I get the right pronunciations because I've learned through experience. If you just trust me to go with my gut, I'm going to get it wrong. So Jen gets back to me. She says it's Jen Chaplin. Jen is in Jen. Chaplin is in Land of Sheps. I gotta love that kind of sense of humor. So our judges said my autobiography of Carson McCullers, they said of it, in the overlapping Venn diagrams of their lives, Chaplin examines her own chronic illness and queerness through the lens of McCullers' struggles with the same, marrying innovative methodology with compellingly honest and lyrical prose. Chaplin provides what so many of McCullers' gatekeepers have tried to ignore, even deny. McCullers was very queer indeed. And in their best books of 2020 write-up, Book Riot adds, this book uncovers ways women's queer history has been ignored. It's a personal, powerful, genre-bending account of literary discovery. Joining this evening from New Mexico, please welcome Jen Chaplin.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Rob. And this has been so fun just to hear everyone read. I am in New Mexico, joining you from my converted garage. So thank you. I'm going to read 3 short chapters from the book, super short. Yeah, I hope there's some humor in there somewhere. The Hunt. In the fall of 2016, recently arrived in Santa Fe and grading hundreds of student papers each week for a terrible online gig, I unexpectedly received an invitation off the wait list to work on my McCullers project for 5 weeks at Yaddo. They wanted me to come the following week and they would pay for my plane ticket. I interpreted this as a miracle. Yaddo was a dream of mine since I first started writing and a goal for inhabiting the places that were most important to Carson. Yaddo is a posh writers and artists colony in Saratoga Springs, New York, about 2 hours from the city, that has welcomed novelists, poets, composers, and visual artists since the 1920s. It was a long trip to New York from my corner of the Southwest. A dark train ride to Albuquerque for the red eye to JFK, and by the following morning, I was falling in and out of sleep on another train up the Hudson, leaves beginning to change along its banks. My first night, late to dinner after falling asleep the second I arrived at my cabin, I took the empty seat beside a poet, a woman who kindly talked me through the procedures of a long and disorienting meal. She soon became one of my real friends. As is customary, a new arrival barely has a chance to eat dinner the first night. At the sight of an unfamiliar artist, the deeply isolated group of 15 pounces and demands a detailed account of the stranger's life and work. Or at least this was the way of things during the late fall I spent in residence. I relayed the details of my project to the poet, keenly aware that every other person at the table was listening through their own conversations. I told her that I was writing about Carson McCullers and her relationships with women. And she said, oh, so she was and trailed off. A what? A lesbian? Was she? After dinner, blissed out on roasted squash and bread pudding and homemade rum raisin ice cream, I walked back to my cabin in the tall pines and paged through books on Yaddo and its history. I found myself scrutinizing the face of one woman in particular, Elizabeth Ames. Elizabeth was the director of Yaddo for nearly 60 years. Carson, age 24, went to meet her after exchanging letters. Elizabeth's sister had set up the meeting after encountering Carson in Columbus. Waite immediately wrote to her sister, the sole force behind bringing artists and writers to Yaddo, asking her to please meet this shy, sweet girl from Columbus who wants so badly to work at Yaddo, but who wouldn't dream of asking anyone to let her come. They were to meet in Elizabeth's hotel room. But when she arrived, Carson was so paralyzed with nerves that she had lost her voice and couldn't face her. She sat in the lobby crying. Eventually, Elizabeth came down, scanned the lobby, and found Carson without ever having seen her before. She brought the unspeaking young woman up to her room and fed her tea, and eventually Carson came back to life. I imagine their first encounter like the department store scene in the movie Carol, where Carol holds all the cards and young Therese can barely talk. Sitting up in my endless white bed, studying the books for photos of Elizabeth, I realized with a start that I was looking for clues. I was a sleuth. I was a huntress. I was hunting lesbians. Semantics. It has dawned on me through researching how Carson lived in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and through living as a lesbian every day, that each time a woman in the 20th century is referred to by the epithets widowed or unmarried, or when she is described as married but living away from her husband for a portion of the year, for example, Georgia O'Keeffe, she is likely a lesbian to some degree or in some capacity. Can it work this way, I wonder? Can a woman be part lesbian? So often the mainstream narrative gives us a straight woman who has the occasional wild affair or fling with a woman, or one who went with women when she was young, say, or she has bisexual tendencies, quote, ambivalences. Of Carson, they flag her obsessive crushes on various women and leave it at that. But I prefer the idea that we are all part lesbian, that we are lesbian to one degree or another. Is this semantics? To say that some part of every human being is a woman, and that part loves women or has the capacity to do so. Jill Johnston, all women are lesbians. Preaching. So it isn't about, is Carson a lesbian, or Carson is a lesbian, or what is a lesbian? What I want to know is, how have lesbians gotten by and had relationships and found love and community? What does that look like? One answer, we don't really know. If we, writers, historians, biographers, can just start acknowledging the lesbian parts of ourselves and others, maybe we can start to know what it is to love women. But please, no more demands for certain kinds of proof. No more doesn't count unless bullshit. Don't tell me there's just not enough evidence. Let's call a lesbian a lesbian. Call yourself a lesbian if you've ever loved women, loved another woman, period. You loved your mother? Lesbian. It's all well and good for me to say this now, but what have I been doing all along if not looking for proof? When I found what I was looking for, I had no clue what to do with it, what it meant. Queer histories often take the form of lists, of calling out and naming kindred spirits. The practice has largely gone out of vogue, as labeling a person's gender or sexual identity, past or present, is fraught with complexities. What did that person call themselves, and what did they mean at the time? Is it best to call a person queer or to specify? Is labeling always an essentializing force? As Maggie Nelson insists, the best way to find out how people feel about their gender or their sexuality, or anything else really, is to listen to what they tell you and try to treat them accordingly without shellacking over their version of reality with yours. Perhaps in calling Carson queer, calling her a lesbian, I am shellacking, setting her on my terms despite my desire to give her space in her own words. By including her words, I make them my own. But there's a part of me, a defiant and somewhat juvenile part, that still wants the list. It's not all that important to me to define what it is to be a lesbian, constant shifting, the ever new, but I can't help but want to know who else is at the table with me, who I can call kin. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jen. And check the chat. You've been all the readers should check the chat. They've been getting a lot of compliments, and as they should. Our next reader and our final reader for the night is Jameson Fitzpatrick, whose book Pricks in the Tapestry, published by Birds LLC, is a finalist for the Thom Gunn Award for Gay Poetry. This is their first full-length collection. The Poetry Project newsletter had this to say about Pricks in the Tapestry. Fitzpatrick's poems regard the sites and sources of hurt, desire, and disturbance with evocative candor. The collection moves through intensely intimate scenes and themes, sex with various lovers in various stages of knowing, coming-of-age memories, discussions of mental health and trauma, emotional upheaval, personal and collective grief, immoderation of all kinds. The poems cast a revealing light onto these experiences, not to pathologize certain behaviors or situations, but to consider them with a wry and introspective sensitivity. Jameson is joining us here in New York City. Across the river in New York City. Please welcome them.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you to all the other readers. It's really an honor to read alongside you, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow evening's program as well. I'm going to read one poem, which is after a John Giorno poem called Grasping at Emptiness. My poem is called Grasping at Being Filled. Fill me, O Muse, fill all my holes, there are so many of them. I look like Saint Sebastian. There is the first hole, the hole from when I was born, dragged, kicking, screaming into this world. This world is a hole. There is the second hole, the absence of the father, the relative absence of every father absent in his own way. You can count on it like a rhyme or fact, the fact that in a certain pair of shorts, I'll get looks from men anywhere I go, different looks depending on the neighborhood. There it goes, the third hole when I got touched, but not where I got touched. And the fourth hole, the hole of sexual difference, the hole of childhood, then the hole of the end of childhood in the backseat of Dave Saturn, the hole of being 14, and the hole of him leaving for college, the whole of being stuck queer in a small town forever, the whole of the feeling of forever, of not being able to drive yet, the whole left by every crush that followed, the whole of what did or did not happen, the whole one made of me in that hotel, the whole of having to go on like this, the deep hole of my voice, womanly but not quite manly, whole of not quite, whole of in between, whole of my inability to get fucked, I mean seriously, whole of my actual whole, the joke of which I am the butt, whole of the failure to fulfill the desires of men, which are the expectations of men in this country, whole of this country, holes this country has made. But back to me, whole of narcissism, whole of neuroticism, whole of ego, whole of I, whole of my mind from which nothing, not I, escapes, whole I made when I threw what was it, whatever it was, whole of Jacques' face when I did it, whole of guilt, whole of shame, whole of my lack of compassion for myself, whole of energy wasted wanting to die when dying is the only thing you can't fuck up, whole of my week in the psych ward, whole of my dead friends, the whole made in the water when he jumped, the whole made in the street when she jumped, the whole made in my love when he OD'd, whole of what I didn't get to say, whole of the illusion it would have made, a difference, whole of how I miss them, whole of being ruled by pettier concerns, petty concerns, my career, my booklessness, my endowment, why people never remember me, whole of the incredible smallness of my problems, pinpricks, pricks in the infinite tapestry of all that is fucked up, whole of the news every day, whole of the everyday, how it dulls, how the whole bores, whole of the light shining through, whole of light and how its beauty accomplishes nothing but the whole of beauty. God, please fuck my mind for good. Like John Giorno said, dissolve it into absolute equanimity, void me, let me be like a water glass, whole if I'm full, whole if I'm empty. Thank you.
Holy fuck, Jameson. I didn't put you at the end because I was expecting that. That was to end a perfect reading, to end a perfect reading group of readers. That was the perfect way to end it. Wow. I want to again mention everyone you've heard from today, and it also gives me a chance to throw these on the floor and make a big mess before the cleaning person comes. Julie Marie Wade, Mark Bibbins, Julie Serrano, Asbrook Corfman, Bishak Som, Ross Slotin, Sarah Sala, Jen Chaplin, and Jameson Fitzpatrick. Could you know what? I hope I'm not asking for a disaster. Could everyone unmute themselves for a second to do this like this?
Do
Woo!
It's,
Yay!
I know it's not, okay, now mute yourself again. It's not the same as being in the same room, but this was amazing. And I want to thank everyone. Look, that's tonight's reading, okay? I want to again thank Greg Newton and the Bureau of General Services Queer Division and encourage you all to become members of the Publishing Triangle, $40 a year, and you support readings like this. Now, go out and buy books. You've heard 9 great readers of 9 great books today. So that's 9 books for your to-be-read pile. And join us again tomorrow. Greg's going to send out the link. I hope I'm not stealing what you were going to say, Greg, but there's another outstanding lineup of 8 readers coming tomorrow night. And I'll be posting those names on Facebook tomorrow morning, but you've probably already seen them. And on Wednesday, join us around noon Eastern Daylight Time as we announce the winners of this year's Publishing Triangle Awards. And now I am muting myself and I am out. Back to Greg Newton.
Thank you so much, Rob. And thank you to all our readers. That was such a lovely reading. I wish I could be in the same room with you, but this is a close second. I hope you all have a lovely evening, and I will see you tomorrow night. Like Rob said, I'm going to send out the link first thing tomorrow morning. I just didn't want to send them out today and confuse you with too many links. So you'll get that link in the morning, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Rob.
And I'm going to post this video online. It will live on.
Greg, thank you so much again. And thank all of you. Thank the readers. You were great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Better than could ever hoped. So we'll be seeing you online.
A domani.
You know where to find me.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.